Darktide is easily one of the most challenging and at times frustrating games in the horde shooter genre. However, for a specific subset of players, overcoming these challenges is the fun of the game. And that's why I'm making this series. I'm hoping to share my knowledge with my viewers, whether they be novice or experts, and help them to overcome greater and greater challenges within the game. To do this, I'm going to create this 5-part series. Each of these videos is going to focus on one aspect of playing Darktide. It might not cover things to the absolute highest level, because a lot of this comes with muscle memory and aim, but I'll impart as much wisdom as I can through words and demonstrations. The 5 parts are as follows. This first video that you're currently watching will cover movement and controls. The second video will cover taking and dealing damage. The third will focus on our enemies, specifically hordes and elites. The fourth will focus on specials and bosses. And the fifth will round everything off with tips and tricks that didn't fit into any other categories. I sincerely hope you enjoy, and let me know in the comments if you learned something today. Red pill or the blue pill? Red pill? Green pill. Now that's the stuff. Oh, hello there. Welcome to DarkGuide, Lesson 1. Ignore the corpses over there. In this lesson, we'll be focusing mainly on movement for our character, such as dodging, jumping, sprinting, etc., as well as the control setup that I think makes you the best at the game. Before we get started on anything to do with controls, I first want to take a moment to tell you that if you are currently using a controller, you are not going to be able to perform as highly as someone who's using a keyboard and mouse. There's nothing wrong with using a controller on the surface, but if you are attempting to push your play as far as possible, if you are using a Game Pass or a computer, if you can use a keyboard and mouse, you absolutely 100% should. It will make you able to acquire targets much more quickly, so I pointed the wrong thing, and make more agile movements, such as turn sliding and stuff like that. That it's going to improve your gameplay. It might not seem like much, but a keyboard and mouse player has a significant advantage over a controller player, especially when it comes to target acquisition. So, with that being said, assuming that we are all using keyboard and mouse, I'm going to take a moment to talk about rebinding some of our actions. Now, a lot of players fall into the trap of assuming that the default bindings are the best way to play the game. However, that's absolutely untrue. Firstly, I don't remember at this point, but the default settings, which I could get if I pressed Q right here, but I'm too lazy to reset all of them for this video. I believe the default settings have activating our ultimate ability on F. It's not a good key. And the reason why is because in order to hit the key F on our keyboard, we cannot also be hitting the letter D. Unless you have some sort of extra finger that I'm not aware of, or you shift your entire hand over one key to the right. That means that we can't be strafing to the right when we activate our ability, because then we have to lift up our finger to press F. That millisecond of hesitation, or the inability to go right when you need to go right and instead having to go left or dodge, could mean the difference between taking a hit and not. So I instead chose to rebind my ability to 1. Now 1 is on my mouse. So I can press 1 with my right hand while moving freely with all 4 fingers of my left hand. I don't have to worry about not being able to move in any given direction when I'm activating my abilities. And this works, this is even more important on classes like Zealot, where using your ability while moving is of the absolute utmost importance. So that is something that I would absolutely change. If you have a mouse with buttons on the side, I would 100% change that. Otherwise, think about putting your ultimate ability on some key that you can reach with your pinky or your thumb, because your 3 middle fingers are going to be occupied with moving your character around. Alright, let's go on to the most important keybind change you could possibly make, which is down here in the movement section. And for some of you, you might not even know this is an option. Dodging and jumping by default are bound to a single key, space. And what this can create, and I've noticed it a lot of times when I've been watching other players, spectating them because I'm down, because I'm bad, is that when you go to dodge someone, you'll oftentimes do a jump. And you'll move in a direction very slowly. Well, this is because they very simply hit the jump key, which is also bound to the dodge key, attempting to dodge, but they did not put in the movement first. So they end up jumping, and then you can see them trying to move in the air in the direction they meant to be dodging. And that will, more likely than not, throw off your aim at the very least, and at the very worst, it'll make you take an attack or more. The simple way to deal with this is just to make the key binding change that I have here. Dodge belongs on the space key because it is always underneath your thumb. Your thumb is a very quick reaction time, and dodging is the most common action that you'll be doing in this game, other than WASD and maybe shooting. Jumping is almost never used in the game. It's only a few times where you'll need to interact with jump obstacles in the environment to get around. So we relegate that to shift. Granted, we can still hit shift and space in the same vein. Shift we can hit with our left pinky and very quickly get over obstacles. We don't want to be interrupted when we're doing these sort of things, so we don't want to have to fumble around or, worst case, have to take our hands off of WASD in order to jump. Same thing with sprinting. My sprinting is bound to left alt. I don't remember what the default is, but that way I can be holding my thumb on left alt, and then I can be jumping with shift. Now, while we're on the topic of jumping, I want to focus on something very quickly that I have learned in the process of playing about 70 levels of Ogren. Ogren in particular has a lot of problems with this. And if you see the little obstacles in front of me here, you, as an Ogren player, you probably know what I'm talking about, which is that Ogren, specifically, and other classes, have a way of getting stuck on small obstacles when they're trying to jump over them. You'll get hung up on them when it feels like it should be an easy step. Now, the game has gotten a little bit better about this, but there are still plenty of times where your feet will get hung up, especially with narrow railings. The secret to this, the secret to always being able to jump over the railing, is simply just holding down your jump key. So if you press yourself up against something and just hold down the jump key, your character will do a mantle and they'll climb over it. And that is one way you can avoid getting stuck on any terrain like this. Alright, let's go over here and take a look at our friend. So we're going to use him for a little bit of target practice here. We have a few different attacks available to us. This is, again, very basic stuff. Everybody knows about the simple left and right attacks, your light attacks. Now this is different based on the weapon you're using, quite obviously. The Katachan Mark III has a left, right, left, and then a stab attack that do small amounts of damage, but are really good and very fast. Who should I spawn in? Sure, great guy. However, there's also the strong attacks. Strong attacks, you can charge. They can hold back for a certain amount of time before they automatically trigger and follow through. But there is one more secret attack that I see a lot of people neglecting. And it's unfortunate because it's not explained anywhere. But you have an ability which is called pushing, right? Everybody knows about pushing, holding down blocking and left clicking to shove. And you'll notice that once I've got someone's sort of stagger broken, when he's set up in his full posture and I shove him, he doesn't move. But once he's staggered once, if I continue to shove him, he gets higher and higher degrees of stagger and falling back. Now this can build up faster with heavier weapons and heavier characters, looking at Ogren. But it's good to know that your shoves affect them more over time the more you shove a character. Now, I'm tired of looking at this guy, so I'm going to show you the last secret attack that you may or may not know exists, but it's called the push stab. And all we need to do in order to do this is to push and then continue holding down our left click, our attack key. And you can see this follows up the push with a very quick overhead attack with the Katachan. Now for some other weapons, For instance, the Antax, which is a very classic axe that a lot of classes use. The Antax has very strong, spawn a few of these guys, has very strong single target attacks, as well as a strong overhead. But it doesn't have very good cleave. This is made up for the fact by the push stab being a cleave attack that can hit multiple targets. So, that's the basics of attacking. There's just one more type of movement I want to talk to you about before we're done with today's lesson, and that is dodging and sliding, the two ways in which we can use our movement to effectively avoid damage. Now, the first one is dodging. I'm pretty certain that everyone is routinely dodging. If you aren't, it's time to start. Dodging utilizes a resource that's independent of stamina. It has nothing to do with your stamina regeneration or stamina regeneration delay. It is solely dependent on the weapon you currently have equipped. So for me, for instance, I can see my dodge count on the center of my screen in white. It's currently 4 on this assault rifle, and if I swap to my melee, it's 5. So it is dependent on the weapon you currently have equipped. Now, if you continue to dodge, your dodges get slightly less effective as you get towards 0 count, and then after 0 count, they get incredibly ineffective to the point where dodging is the worst thing you could do. You can see it slows me slower than my normal movement speed when I'm dodging. It only takes a brief second to get all of your dodge count back, but it is a trap that it's really easy to fall into, especially if you're a new player. I'll let Safoni finish talking here. Thank you, Safoni. It's a trap that new players often fall into, or any player who's in a panic situation where they will panic dodge, usually backwards, and they'll use up all their dodge, and by that time, the enemies have closed the distance to them, and they'll drop an overhead attack or some sort of punishing attack like that, and you won't have any dodges left. So what I would recommend doing is really maintaining awareness of how many dodges you've used. If you can get the mod, I highly recommend it. If you can't, just look at your weapon's details. For instance, I can check it out here. Here's your dodge count. It's dependent on your mobility stat. So this is your dodge limit is between 3 and 5 with this weapon. So by having over 50% mobility, we're looking at a dodge limit of 5, the maximum. And just count in your head if you're dodging. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it'll save you from being out of dodges when it comes time to dodge an overhead from a crusher. Oftentimes, especially if you look at the replay at the beginning of this video, you'll see me pausing for a beat before I dodge a crusher overhead or something that I know will be a punishing attack that I need to dodge. I cannot block or deflect. And that's because I want to be sure, even without looking at my dodge count, that I have some dodges available. Now there's one other way that we can close distance or dodge damage as we approach enemies. Now you can see here that I can use dodge to dodge some of the damage that this gunner is putting out, but not all of it. One way that I can dodge a vast majority of damage while closing the distance to an enemy is by sliding. You see there, I only took a few bullets on the way to him, and that is accomplished by sprinting and then crouching. Your sprint speed is going to affect how long your slide is. So for a weapon like this, I have a pretty good mobility stat. It actually increases my movement speed by about 20% over the default. But for a weapon like the dagger, you have a greatly increased movement speed, so your slides become even longer. So if I wanted to close the distance on this guy now, I got nearly all the way there before he was able to do anything. And if I stealth, I go even farther. This is a great way to close the distance and get yourself in a better position. Anyway, ladies and gents, that is about all there is to know, at least for the very basics, on the terms of movement, dodging, basic combat. If there's any more questions, feel free to add them in the chat. I will be exploring movement abilities that are available to specific classes in my 5th video, where I cover everything that's not going to be in the first 4. There's lots of tips and tricks that are available to different abilities that the classes have, such as the Stealth and Ogren Charge and Zealot Charge, that really change the way you play around with movement. But for starters, dodging and sliding at the appropriate times will make you a much more evasive and more elusive target. You'll take a lot less damage, and that's a good thing. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening to this lesson. I'll see you next time on Dark Guide Lesson 2.